Welcome to Study Loop.
For this question, we are looking at evolution and the genetic similarities between different organisms. So when we talk about evolution, we usually depict this in a tree-like format, where we're going to have a common ancestor between different organisms, and there are going to be branches at which speciation occurs, or where certain mutations are picked up in organisms. So you can imagine that at each of these kinks, vertices, and points, some sort of mutation or change is occurring inside of a species in order to differentiate it from the other direction of the branching. So here, organisms that will be most similar are going to be those that are closest to each other. So here, between B and C, you only have one mutation or one characteristic mostly that's going to separate them and differentiate them from one another. So they're going to be very similar. When we talk about these similarities and differences, you'll often see we use the term of homologous structures or homologous characteristics. And these are sort of characteristics or features that are going to develop similarly between organisms, such as, say, the bony structures of an appendage, such as a fin or an arm, or say the use of an organ, such as the appendix. So when we talk about homologous structures, these are going to be most similar between very close organisms. So when they very early arise inside a species, they're only going to occur in a small number of different organisms because they have this one point of intersection where those homologous features arose from. So here we know that A is going to be true. When we look at the genetic makeup of each of these, or the DNA, they're going to be more similar again based on how close they are to one another. So B and C are also going to be fairly similar with their DNA. And these changes in DNA allow us to link it back to this common ancestor by tracking the changes and differences from the different branches, giving our different species. So we know that B is also going to be true. And due to the relativity of how close species are to one another, we measure this by their degree of DNA. So if you actually compare ferns and say humans, to some extent these organisms can be very similar in genetic coding, even though they have very different characteristics, both outward physical appearance and inward metabolic structures. So here, DNA can be fairly similar between organisms despite their differences in characteristics. So D here is also going to be true. So this only leaves us with answer choice C as false, which makes sense because when we look at our anatomical sets, such as comparing the physical appearance between humans and say a fern or say an orangutan, you're going to see many differences despite similarities in the DNA and genetic structure. So anatomical sets are not going to be what we base our speciation or the similarities between different organisms from. So here C is going to be false.